What's up, everyone? Welcome to Take Human Action PA, episode 28. I'm Calvin. I'm your host for tonight. We've got a very exciting episode. Before we get started, I'll just say I'll keep it to one announcement this time. The convention link for the LPPA, the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania 2023 convention, is live. I will post it in the comments so you guys can take a look at it afterwards. Definitely sign up now. We have early bird packages through mid-January. So definitely check that out. All the best libertarians from Pennsylvania will be there, as well as Dave Smith, Maj Toure, Hannah Cox, and others. I'm drawing. There will be more, so definitely check out the website and sign up. And I hope to see you there. It's in Reading, Pennsylvania this year. So with that, I'll introduce our guests. So our first guest is Mises Caucus organizer out of Georgia, and he's also been producing documentaries, including one most recently about Shane Hazel's gubernatorial campaign out of Georgia. So let's welcome Jake Green. How you doing, Jake?
Great. How you doing, Calvin?
Yeah, and we've got another person joining us for tonight. He's also a Mises Caucus organizer out of Georgia, and he has now made the official move to Pennsylvania and joined us here. Let's welcome Nick to the stream. How you doing, Nick?
Hey, Calvin. How's it going? I'm a little surprised. We're talking about the Shane Hazel documentary, and you failed to mention that he's on the speaker schedule for the PA convention.
That is a good point. Yeah, I knew there was a fourth name. I was drawing a blank, so that makes it even more even more silly on my part, but that's fine. So Shane Hazel will be at the convention as well. Nick, I'm pretty sure you're going, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Jake, if you go too, then we'll be perfect. We got Shane, Nick, myself, and
I'm planning on coming this time. I missed last year because I was out of town, but yeah, I'll plan on being there this year.
All right, that'll be a fun time.
Yeah.
So I like to start it out with asking how you got into libertarianism and the liberty movement. So let's start with Jake. What were your political origins?
Well, I grew up Republican. I grew up in Texas, super Republican, went to like George Bush rallies and that kind of crap. And then went to college at SCAD in Savannah and got influenced by a bunch of people there. So I basically became a Bernie bro. I've had a long path to libertarianism. And then once I started really diving into the economics on Bernie Sanders and how none of his things would ever work in reality, I started going back towards republicanism because I'd never heard of libertarianism at that point. But then I slowly went from like Ben Shapiro to like Steven Crowder, and then kind of made my way and found Dave Smith. And Dave was the one who brought me to, I actually joined the Mises Caucus before I joined the Libertarian Party.
Right on. So when was that you joined, you think?
I joined around the same time Nick did. That was what, was that 2021 or 2020?
It was 2021. It was like March 2021, March or April, I think.
Yeah, so we're baby libertarians, technically speaking.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. So how long after that did you start being an organizer?
Almost immediately. Like
okay,
within a month.
Jumping right in head first. I like it. So what about you, Nick?
Yeah, so it was kind of one of those things where 2016, I kind of liked a little bit of Trump with his, F you to the whole media thing. And that kind of got the wheels turning a little bit, seeing that and going, there's something going on here. And I had like back in college, like, 2012 or so, I had a roommate who did some of the deep dive into the Federal Reserve stuff and was telling me about it then. And it kind of, it was like, that's kind of weird and interesting. And then like I had a professor a couple weeks later say the same stuff in class. And then that kind of stuck. And then, like I said, so 2016, things are kind of in flux there. And I had a coworker who kind of turned me on to like Tom Woods. Well, we were discussing stuff, and he actually came out to the LPPA convention with me last year, the 2021 convention. but yeah, he turned me on to Tom Woods, and that led Dave Smith and everything like that. So like 2016 onward, it's kind of like I was sitting there not really, kind of just listening to the podcasts and reading and whatever else. And then, 2020 and happened, and the whole COVID insanity. And it was like, got to do something, and then, come 2021, it was like, all right, let's join this and get going, so.
Right on. All right. So since you joined right around the same time, maybe you can both, describe to us what was it like in Georgia when you initially showed up? I don't know if it was like one of your county meetings or like that first convention in 2021. Like, what was the state of the party in Georgia at that point?
Go for it, Nick.
Yeah. So I joined right after the Georgia convention. So in 2021. So I didn't go to that one. The first time I really hung out with anyone, like the first time I met Jake in person and a bunch of the other guys, was I believe it was Memorial Day weekend when National had their regional training in Atlanta, and Jake and I were at that. And so that was kind of my first exposure in person. I had neglected to go to any meetings, and then I kind of set up my own county affiliate, and Jake kind of set up his own county affiliate, and we were kind of doing those things. I mean, Jake and I only lived 10 minutes from each other, and different counties though. So
yeah, because how it was like situated here in Atlanta, because we were right outside of Atlanta, is they had LP Atlanta, and they decided that they wanted to make it two separate counties and have LP DeKalb and LP Fulton. And so I got tricked into being the chair of LP DeKalb somehow, and Nick volunteered to be chair for LP Fulton.
Yeah.
Nice. So I'd imagine sometime around the first few months that you were there, at some point you either met or heard of Shane Hazel, because this wasn't his first statewide campaign. He'd done a campaign before this. So how did you end up ultimately meeting up with him, and around when did you find out he was going to be doing another campaign?
Yeah, there were people were talking about it right when I joined. So it was like I kind of knew about it in March, April time period, and then really started following him. And I reached out to him through Twitter in probably late May, and told him that I want to come film his life for a year and a half. And he said, bring it on. And yeah, it was, he made it very easy. It was very quick. There was like no negotiation. It was just like, yes, let's make a movie. So that's exactly what happened.
Well, then you went up to his house, and you want to get into how you guys almost died?
Oh,
I'll just do a quick one. We're sitting on his back porch. He lives up in the mountains, middle of nowhere, and we hear people firing in the distance, clearly set up a range on a mountainside. And all of a sudden we hear two bullets whiz right past the porch, and we all get up, sprint inside. Like, his daughter's crying. Like, it's intense, because like all his kids are out there, and me and my wife are out there. He and his wife are out there, and he takes off into the woods and goes and confronts these guys. And it was a very interesting day, that's for sure.
So how did it end? Did he just find nothing?
No, he found them, and he very much confronted them, and they've never been back on the property again. They were basically using their friend's property to shoot, and their friend like his neighbors never let anybody use his property again to set up a firing range. So
yeah, that's insane. Like that's I mean, I imagine in most of Pennsylvania this is not the case, but I'm like in our area near Philadelphia, it would just be so foreign to me. If I heard a gunshot, I would think that I would think that there's like one of those, city crimes in active progress, like a shooting or something. Like I wouldn't associate it with just target practice.
Yeah, it's a little different, I guess, when you live in the mountains. with like
Yeah.
3 neighbors, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a little bit different. So Nick, how did you get involved?
Yeah, so just being a part of the Mises Caucus there, Shane's one of our guys and he's running, so we kind of stepped in there. Shane had some issues come up, so right before the 2022 LP Georgia convention, like the week before, because the weekend before, Jake and I and one of the other organizers, Jared, were up at Shane's house and we recorded a podcast in his studio with him, trying to get people out to the convention. Then come a week later, the next weekend at convention, Shane had hurt his back. And so he was down there. He showed up on Saturday, but couldn't make it back for business on Sunday. So, it kind of got to this point where, we wanted to help on this campaign, but he also, he was kind of down and we kind of had to step up and go, all right, we're going to make something happen here, because he ended up in the hospital and 2 surgeries, and he was in the hospital for a week and all this other stuff off of this. Like, it was crazy what ended up happening there. And we're like,
yeah, it was pretty
we just
bad.
can't, we got a later start, and so didn't get as much accomplished or organized as we wanted. But it was like, all right, well, we're just going to start attacking things and trying to get whatever we can going.
Yeah. Well, definitely from the film, like I did see it myself. You wouldn't know. Like it definitely is. From my perspective, it covers, just about everything. I kind of expected it to, I don't want to say just, but in a sense, just follow his campaign and track the progress of it. But it does a lot more than that. It explains all the concepts behind the topics that he's talking about too, in like a very clear way. And
yeah,
but before we get into it too much, why don't you talk to us, Jake, about how you got into making documentaries?
I kind of got into it because, I did film school, so it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do. I didn't go to college for 5 years after high school, just kind of worked jobs and stuff like that, and then got into film school as a screenwriter. Realized that you basically have to have millions of dollars and an army of people to make like a non-documentary movie. And I don't have those things. So I just started making documentaries because you can just go out and make a documentary with you and a camera. You really don't need anything except what you have. And so it makes it really a lot more accessible to make something like a documentary. It just makes it easier. You can do exactly what you want to do and not have somebody else's vision forced upon you, and not be told to re-edit things and shoot this and don't shoot that. And you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. So you have a lot more freedom when you shoot these independent documentary style movies.
Yeah, I bet. So you talked with Shane, was it right before the convention where he was nominated to get this started?
It was a few months before. So it was like May of 2021, and then he was nominated in January. Mm-hmm. So okay. It may have all died at convention. If he wasn't nominated, then I wouldn't have a movie.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, but it was a pretty safe bet. Yeah, it was a pretty safe bet that he was getting nominated. So I wasn't too worried about it.
Yeah. So how many people ended up working on the documentary, and what kind of planning was done at the beginning?
It's a good question. I don't know, Nick. I mean, like 10, 15 people total, maybe.
Probably. I mean, like you
and Jared worked on it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we pitched in where we could, but I mean, it was kind of your thing, and of course, your wife helped.
Yeah.
Portions on with
for sure
that, and your friends with music and.
Yeah, not whole lot of planning. I like to wing it. I just kind of show up, ask the questions I want to ask, and film as much as I can, and then edit it all together later. Um, but yeah, I'd say somewhere between 10 and 20 people total worked on this thing. We got we got Angela McCardle as an interview, we got Spike Cohen as an interview, Jared Bell did an interview, and then Shane, obviously, all over the place. So we got like
We were
4
trying.
really good interviews. We tried to get a whole bunch more, but libertarians are hard to nail down, man.
Yeah,
Well,
Jake. I was trying everything I could to get in contact with Dave Smith or get Jake in contact with Dave. Like Jake was ready to fly up there, like
Yeah,
what 2 weeks before the documentary premiere to try to get an interview
oh
down.
man,
He
yeah.
neglected to do it at the national convention. So,
that's
Neglected.
too bad.
well,
I did have a small opportunity, but I thought it would be better if I had interviewed him in his hometown. So that was my bad.
Yeah, well, maybe you'll get a chance at the PA convention. This is his 3rd year in a row coming to a state convention. I don't think he's done that anywhere else.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Good
so
for
we're
y'all.
lucky to have him here.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I also, well, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure our convention this past year was the only one where he did where he shared a panel with Tom Woods.
Nice. I bet that was a good one. Did you go to
Yeah,
that,
that
Nick?
was I did. That was a good one.
Mhm.
Nice.
Right. So back to Shane, though. So when you were talking about the documentary, you did miss one person in particular who I think most of the audience would know and did a lot of work on the documentary. A certain narrator.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we scored Robbie the Fire Bernstein as the narrator. A little bit into filming, I realized that it was going to be a super dark and depressing movie if I didn't like put some comedy in there. It would be a super doom and gloom. So, looked through a list of libertarian comedians, and Robbie was at the top of the list, obviously. And he happened to be doing Shane's podcast like June or July that year. And so I connected with him, and he said, absolutely. He read part of the script that I had written for the narrator, and he said, absolutely. And he knocked that out in like 3 days, 3 or 4 days. It was unbelievable. It was great. Yeah, I thought he killed it.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I could see how that would be very dark and depressing without that levity in there. I think he did a really good job with it.
Yeah, he killed it, man. He was a friggin' pro too. He would get things back to me like way faster than any other creative person ever gets things back to anybody.
Yeah, that's hysterical.
Yeah.
So while all that was going on, how was Shane's campaign progressing? And either one of you can take that.
Yeah. This was the first time I think any of us have really worked on a campaign. Myself, Jake, Jared, and we were the ones heading this up and trying to figure it out as we went along. So, there's a lot of things that we tried and didn't work. And I think there's situations in Georgia that make it a more difficult thing than in other places, right? So, just paying a little bit of attention of what went on in PA, I saw, you have state house candidates who might be having an event, and then you can piggyback your governor candidate into those and maybe reach a little bit more. But in Georgia, and the documentary gets into this, but ballot access is a real issue there. So we could only really run people statewide. We couldn't run those districted races without dumping a whole lot of effort into petitions, at which point you're going to burn a bunch of resources and a bunch of volunteers just trying to get on the ballot there and then not have a campaign on those. So, it doesn't really make sense to run those races there. So we're kind of trying to figure things out ourselves. People get busy. So and then, like I said, Shane had the back issues and the surgeries and the hospital stay. and and also, he's not the kind of candidate that's just gonna take direction. He's a very you know
He's very
he knows what he
proactive.
wants.
Yes,
Yes,
he knows
he knows what
exactly
he
what he
wants,
wants.
and whenever something, he might be willing to try something, but the second it's not working, it's all right. We're gonna pivot and go do something else.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and
you know,
the injury definitely hurt. Like he was out for a while, like way
yeah.
longer than anybody knew.
Like we missed the entire primary season to get out there because of it, and it wasn't until like May or so that we went up to his house and we're like, all right,
yeah, and he
we're
was
doing
still
something
iffy.
here.
he
Yeah.
was still like partially injured at that time, so it didn't make things easier, that's for sure. But what are you going to do? You can't really fix that, so it is what it is.
Yeah. So what was he still podcasting all the while this was going on?
Nope.
No.
He
It
really
took long hiatuses.
Yeah, he's been getting consistent again, but yeah, he like disappeared for a month there and came back on like a oh, I can't even podcast from my studio because I can't get up the steps.
Yeah, you could hear
kind of
you could hear the
episode.
birds on the back porch because he was just doing it into his iPhone.
I was lucky enough to meet Shane. What was it, 2021? He came to that PA convention, and I could tell just from like a short conversation that he's tough. So I mean, it was awesome to get a chance to talk to him. Like I could tell, like he's just from that short conversation, he was a really good messenger, but really, really tough too. So to hear that when I did hear it the first time, like it's like wow.
I mean, spending the time, you see how much of a messenger he is. I mean, he is one of the best messengers we have, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Really.
Oh yeah, no
legitimately one of the best.
Right. So going from there then, so what kind of what did his campaign have, like specific roles, like, oh, this person's like social media manager, this person's like media outreach person? How was it organized behind the scenes?
Yeah, we tried to get some specific roles and recruit volunteers. So Jake kind of took up media because that's kind of his thing.
Yeah.
I was trying to get volunteers together and try to organize some sort of ground game. And then Jared was kind of doing a lot of the administrative managing and stuff like that. Financials, things like that. But we were piecing things together. So, it got to a point where like we had a couple really solid volunteers and we had some people who'd show up to things, but like I couldn't get teams together. We didn't have, I was trying to get teams around the state. It was just hard to find the leadership to get people to sign up, to get on meetings, to find the time to do all, everything you need there. And then the resources to be like, we didn't have the donations coming in until right at the very end where we could spend the money on like, all right, here's a tabling package for you guys in Savannah. Go do this, go do that. It's like, there's needs to be a lot of planning and a lot of money ahead of time that, I think we neglected, and we learned from there. So,
yeah, it's like the bulk of our money came in after the debate on PBS, and that was like 3.5 weeks before the election.
Right.
So like when the bulk of your money is coming in at that time, it's almost too late to do anything substantial with it.
Yeah,
like
because it's not one of those. Yeah, it's not a situation like we have ads running and things like that where, oh, a bunch of money comes in, we just boost what we have. I mean, we would have had to start. I mean, we were also getting denied from YouTube ads and,
oh my gosh, the amount of times we've been like,
yeah,
because I was trying to set up YouTube ads, Facebook ads, all these things, and you just get rejected constantly. Like with Facebook, it's crazy. They made me like verify who I was, verify that I was part of the party, and then they denied the verification and said that I needed to be verified via actual snail mail. So they actually sent a letter to me that I had to fill out all my information and send it back to them. So that was like a 2-week process alone just to try to get Facebook to let us run ads. And they ended up denying it anyway. So like
Wow.
it was
Meanwhile,
extremely difficult.
you couldn't watch a video without seeing a Stacey Abrams or Raphael Warnock ad.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a whole.
I saw so many Fetterman ads. now he's like going to be the joke of the Senate. It's crazy. I definitely get that.
Yeah. Is he going to be any worse than Biden? Let's be real.
Well, I just want to see them do joint speaking events for the next 2 years.
Gosh, I would love that.
That's why I was kind of hoping that Herschel Walker would win in Georgia, and then you could have Walker and Fetterman just throw them on committees together and just see what happens.
Oh yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, but one other thing, I definitely want to get to the debate. But one thing I wanted to mention first was his previous run for the Senate. Is that right? He was in the Senate before. Okay, so that generated a lot of attention, and at least probably in Georgia as a whole to an extent, but also in like the libertarian space, I think that's when he really became more well known, because he played the spoiler role that Chase seems to have repeated this year for the Senate race again. But going back to that, did you notice that gave Shane more positive attention, notoriety, or anything that you noticed along the way when you're working on this campaign this time? Like, did people know who he was from that?
People definitely knew who he was more than they did before. Like, we would show up to, we got invited to some Republican leaning events, and they would know who he was when he got there. And there were some, I don't know, a lot more people than I would have thought before knew who he was. And I would say it's most likely from that Senate run, because I don't know what else it would be from.
Yeah. So what motivated, or do you know why he ran for governor this time instead of Senate?
That's a good question. Nick, did we ever talk about that?
I think the largest part was he was extremely unhappy about the lockdowns in 2020.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to be the one taking on Kemp. And we saw that in the debate, because, he kind of knew where to hit Kemp on that. But yeah, I think that's largely what it was. I don't think it was, I think strategically, another Senate run would have been maybe more effective, because we saw what Chase did in Georgia, pushing it to a runoff. But yeah, it seems like the Republicans in Georgia fell back in line behind Campo. He wasn't that bad. He was the first governor who shut down the reopen, right? So
yeah, people had very short memories here, which is what we learned with the results of the election.
I mean, by the time I had moved to Georgia in May of 2020, things were open. Like, I was in Texas before then, and you couldn't go to the gym. You couldn't go to a restaurant. I get to Georgia, and I mean, gyms are open. You can do things. So,
yep.
It was an extremely short lockdown, I guess, there. But
yeah,
that was always funny though with Kemp, because he couldn't decide whether he never locked down or if he had reopened before anyone else.
Yeah.
And if you watched him enough, he was always going back and forth between those. But yeah, I think the combination of, well, he was better than all the other ones, and Stacey Abrams being Stacey Abrams just led everyone to fall in line and go, nope, I'm not risking anything in this one.
Yep.
Even though, like, the polling heading into that had Stacey Abrams just falling off a cliff.
That's true.
So.
Oh yeah, she's a whole nother animal. Just the quintessential double standard person. Like, I mean, I don't know too much about her, but just like with taking that picture with all the children masked up and her without it, it's just, I mean,
well, Jake did a whole podcast with Brad Binkley from the Propaganda Report on the LP Georgia podcast, called Don't Be Mean to Stacey Abrams, She's a Victim, I believe is the title of the episode.
Is that what they said after that?
That's the title of our episode. Yeah, don't be mean to Stacey Abrams. She's a victim. Yeah, I did a whole episode about her with Brad Binkley. It was a great episode because he does these super deep dives into all these candidates here in Georgia, and he knows everything about Stacey Abrams, and it was very enlightening. And yeah, with that picture with her and the school children, anytime she would tweet anything, we had a few people who would just tweet that photo at her, just reply with that photo, nothing else, like for a period of like 6 or 7 months. And so, yeah, that photo would get liked and passed around all the time. And it's just like the most hypocritical photo I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. So I also want to talk about voter outreach. We got someone who dropped a question I think plays into it. So what do you think that libertarians should do to gain more of the liberal and conservative vote? So what were you guys doing in the course of the campaign? Any tips for future campaigns, anything along those lines?
Let's see. Well, I mean, our campaign wasn't a huge success, so I'm not sure if we're the proper people to be giving advice on this. I just know, like, we know a lot of things that we could have done better, which one of them was definitely more like focusing our resources and having a much, I would say, creating more media and more professional media. But obviously, that's coming from the media guy, so like. Little biased because we made a couple commercials with Shane. We had the Had Enough campaign here in Georgia, and then we had a couple of his like platform issues that we did commercials on. We could have done a whole lot more with that. We could have done more with his social media. We could have done more with. We could always just do more, but the issue is we don't have the money to do more. Like nobody has the time, nobody has the money, no one is fully employed by the Libertarian Party to do any of this. Like we all have full-time jobs, and so it just makes it extremely difficult to find the resources and the time to put into to do the things that need to be done. And there were always things that we needed to be doing, but we just had limited time and resources.
I mean, yeah, I think, it comes down to what kind of race you're talking about, right? So in a statewide race like this, I think maybe a little bit of a media spectacle is the way to go, right? I mean, for all intents and purposes, there's not really too much of a difference between 1%, 2%, 5%, even maybe 10%, right? I mean, in Georgia, potentially because of the runoff and needing to have a majority to actually win a race in Georgia, which they're probably just going to eliminate because they're sick of us forcing them to go to runoffs. But they, really, if you're not, you're either going to force the runoff or you're not in Georgia. And, forcing the runoff is better than not. But, if you force the runoff, it doesn't really matter if you have 2% or 5% or 10%. Either which way, you're still coming in third, you're still losing there. So really it's about messaging and getting the ideas out there, and making sure you're known and making sure that people know, hey, there is an alternative here. People are active, join, and we can maybe get something going.
Yeah. And I think that some of the best times to get people to join our team or whatever, our party, is when it's not campaign season, when it's not so heated, like we have to pick our person or else we're all going to be screwed. When it's not like so heavily debated and so there's not so much animosity between the two parties and not so much is on the line. I think times like now and over the next 6-7 months are probably the best times to start talking to people about about our party and like what we believe in and why we think things should change. And in person is always the best way to do that. Always. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back to the campaign trail. So when Shane was getting healthy again and you were able to go out and campaign a little bit more, were you really under the gun to get more footage for the documentary at that point? Or like what stage were you at by the time he came back out?
Yeah, no, I needed so much footage when he started coming back out, because like when he went down in January, he was out for 2 or 3 months. We really didn't do any filming, very, very little. I maybe went out to his place one time. And so, yeah, we went to tons of events. I filmed every bit of them, and needed every single bit of footage that I filmed too, which was crazy. Yeah, but I don't know. We went to, how many events do you think we went to, Nick, over the course of like those 3 or 4 months? Like,
maybe 10.
no, we went to more than that. You didn't come to some
Did
of
we?
them. Yeah. So
Yeah, I know I missed a couple of them.
yeah, I'd say closer to 20, 25. Yeah, a lot of small groups just wanting a speaker and wanting to be talked to about things like are in the documentary, things like Bitcoin and police issues and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I could definitely tell from the documentary there were some small venues he was speaking at. You almost got the sense where it was like maybe like a classroom or a small meeting room, and then there are definitely some like larger events, maybe some of like the outside rallies. So how did you get involved in those events? Like, were they scheduled around like having him come out there? Were they existing events that he came out and spoke to? Like, how did he get involved with these events?
Yeah, so the bigger ones that were outdoors, it was kind of a slate of speakers, mostly Republicans with a couple independents and libertarians in there. And so we would just show up and he would give his speech and talk to all the people around. With the smaller events, it was mainly just they wanted him to come talk, and they like put their support behind him for governor, and they wanted to hear what he had to say about some specific topics. And a few groups even invited him back a couple more times to talk some more. So yeah, the bigger events were more of a community thing, and the smaller ones were, we want Shane to come talk to us.
Yeah. So what kind of groups were they?
I can't remember the names of any of them. I have them written down.
We went to the one at the vape shop talking about cannabis policy.
Yeah.
And it had a couple other people who were candidates. So like the agricultural commissioner for candidate for LP Georgia. He was there because his whole campaign revolved around passing out weed to everyone. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
And then there was a sitting state senator there, and then a guy running for school board in one of the counties and things like that. So there was a small slate of candidates, and Shane was speaking there. He went out to UGA and spoke to their YAL crew out there. There was, I can't remember what it was, but it was a group of it was a couple of Black Republicans in Georgia who were fed up with Kemp and stuff that had him out to like that outdoor event.
Yep.
Yeah,
and then, so I mean, a lot of the other smaller groups, all I remember is that a bunch of them had freedom and liberty in the name of their group. So it was spot on for Shane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you find out about those groups? Did someone like cold reach out to them, or did some of them reach out to him, or how did that go?
No. Most of the time they reached out to him, I think. Either that or he reached out to them. He did a lot of his own reaching out to folks, and like he tried to use his podcast in the most effective way possible and have certain people on. And yeah, I think he would do a lot of the reaching out, or they would call him email him.
Or there'd be inquiries through Twitter sometimes, and
Yeah.
like he'd send me people to reach out to, like, oh, this person wants to get involved, this person wants to have an event, this person's a pissed off Republican who might be willing to do an event, things like that. So
yeah. Well, I think that's an important point, is sometimes if you're running a campaign, you don't always know where to start. Like, how do you find like events you can go to, ways you can get out there, so that it's not always intuitive what way you go about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not at all.
it can be difficult. I mean, like, we were just trying anything we could, right? So we did an LP Georgia table at a gun show,
Yeah, went great. It was awesome. Everybody had a great time.
Right.
We all bought guns. It was a good time.
Everybody bought guns.
Well, Nick, you're probably on the better side of the state for that. You'll get a lot more of that on the western side of PA than on the eastern side of PA. At least in the southeast, you won't see much of that. But around the time I first met Shane, besides pulling off the split in the Senate race, he was also known for being a big Bitcoin guy at that time as well, which he still is. But when he was talking about Bitcoin on the campaign trail, like what kind of reaction would people get? Would people ask like what it is, or they just have an idea but want to know more? Like how did that go over?
Yeah, so a couple of the groups that invited him back specifically to talk about Bitcoin because they were intrigued. So that was like reassuring that people he was actually able to explain it in a way where people were intrigued and not just confused and like put off by it. Because Bitcoin's like, I mean, as libertarians, we don't always feel this way, but Bitcoin's a huge topic for people, and like one that's really hard for people to even begin to comprehend.
Because you have to start not just on Bitcoin, but really start with money itself.
Yeah.
And then
exactly.
give a rundown of money and what's wrong with that and why Bitcoin fixes that, right?
Yes,
so
exactly,
as the meme goes. So, he has a way of generally being able to do that. There were some times I think it missed.
Yeah.
But
that happens with
anywhere.
everything. Yeah.
So
you're always going to miss sometimes, but I don't know. Bitcoin, it seemed to be pretty resonant with people. Like people seem to really be interested in, especially since inflation was skyrocketing throughout this whole year. And people were seeing the value of their dollar go down. So I think people were interested in that kind of topic and interested in knowing how to safeguard their money. So I think it went over much better than most of the other points that he would talk about, because I think Bitcoin was the most popular thing that he would talk about.
Well, that's really good to know, because I was thinking for a while anyway that it'd be complicated that most people either wouldn't be interested or wouldn't understand it. So I guess I'm pleasantly surprised that that got such a warm reception.
Yeah, I was too. I was shocked when, I mean, one of the groups was mainly like 50, 60, 70-year-old people, and they invited him back to have a full-on presentation just about Bitcoin. It was amazing. And we were there for like 3 hours just talking about Bitcoin to these retirees. It was great.
Were you guys helping them set up wallets by the end of it?
Yeah, we were talking to them about ledgers and all that stuff, and showing them where to buy it and everything. So.
Oh man, wow, that's really cool to think about. Yeah, I'll have to remember that when we have our candidates running this time around 2023. There should be a lot in PA.
Nice.
So you got footage at the convention. You got footage at the various events that he did. Where else were you getting footage from?
Oh, I would go up and film at his place quite a bit. We would film just side interviews and questions that I had and storylines that I needed to be filled and stuff like that. And I'd film his family quite a bit. And then basically any event he would go to, I'd go to. I'd take some podcast footage that he had.
You went up to Michigan for their convention with him.
Yeah.
I don't know if you used the footage of him going at it with Amash or.
I did not
Was
use
that
that footage.
yeah.
I did. That felt unnecessary. Just
Because
confrontational
there was
for no
like a
reason.
battle that like because Amash, I think, what was he arguing that the
AUMF.
AUMF was basically was a declaration of war.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It is what it is. It's old news. No one cares. It's fine. Amash is great. But yeah, I went up to Michigan with him because he was born in Michigan. And so he went up there to speak at their convention last year. So I flew up there with him, and yeah, basically anywhere Shane went, I would go, like all the time. It was a lot of time spent with Shane.
How far were you driving to get to his place in some of these events?
His place is about an hour and 10 minutes from me. And we'd drive 2 or 3 hours to go to some of these events. So
yeah, went down to Alabama, right?
Yeah, well, I drove down to Alabama's convention as well with him. So that was 5-hour drive. Just a lot of we became buds over this past year and a half. It's been great. Like,
yeah,
he's a really good friend at this point. So, when you're stuck in a car with somebody for a year and a half, you're either going to love each other or hate each other by the end of it. So we ended up loving each other. So that was good.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So I definitely wanted to also ask about the debate. So before we get to the debate itself, how did that happen? What was the lead up to it?
Well, PBS, or what's the station here, Nick?
Georgia Public Broadcasting.
Yeah. GPB,
so
whatever.
It's the PBS affiliate, I think, but basically in Georgia, it's put on by the Atlanta Press Club, and so anyone on the ballot, which largely is Democrats and Republicans, and us on the statewide stuff, because nobody else has access to the statewide ballot for things like that. So you don't generally get independents, you don't get any other party on there because the bar's too high, and we maintain it every year. And that's why we continue to be able to run candidates. But so they will invite anyone who's on the ballot, and they're the only debate that will, because there were several others, and they didn't want to hear it. Like, we tried calling, like I think Jared tried calling the producers and everything like that, and tried to weasel his way in and try to talk to the decision makers and see what could be done, and they didn't want to hear it. But props to the Atlanta Press Club for putting everyone who's on the ballot, on debate stage together.
Yep.
Even if sometimes that person's represented by an empty podium, Herschel Walker.
Yeah. So we were an automatic invitee to that. So that was wonderful. It is a great thing that they do there. I mean, I feel like they kind of have to, because they are publicly funded, so they better be inviting everybody. But yeah, that's the one thing we can look forward to during the actual election month is that debate.
And then by just pure luck, I guess, because alphabetical, Hazel comes between Abrams and Kemp, so he got the middle podium. So they had to try to argue across him, which put him in a position to, be assertive there and get a little bit more attention than had he been off to the side.
Yeah. So keep that in mind if you're trying to run candidates. If you're running against people, try to get somebody with a name in between them for the debates.
Yeah, I think I remember reading about how they, like, within the debate that Chase did, they showed what's this guy's name, the Reverend
Warnock,
Raphael Warnock. Yeah.
They kept showing him, like, with an empty podium, or they cut Chase out of the shot or something like that. It's just they're doing pretty crazy things. So are they doing something similar with Shane?
Yeah, they would use 2 cameras and put Abrams and Kemp up on a split screen. Even though Shane was in the middle, like if
they went to a full shot, they had to show him. And then you got the pictures after, and he's standing there in the middle, and they're like, Abrams and Kemp debate, and then we're all tagging on Twitter, "Hey, who's that guy in the middle?"
Yeah, it's true.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. So before I get into the debate, I forgot to ask about the signature requirements. Are they pretty hefty in Georgia? Like, was that difficult to do?
Not for
So
statewide races. Statewide
yeah,
races, you don't
so
have to get any.
yeah, we don't have to. We didn't have to do any petition for that because I believe it's one. I believe we have to get 1% of all registered voters, not people who vote, all registered voters to vote for a statewide candidate. So it works somewhere around 2% or so to be safe. And that keeps our statewide access for the next year. We're going to have a real issue in 2024 because of that. And because there was a court case that basically threw out the positions that we would use in 2024 to keep that access. So there's going to be an issue in Georgia where where that access has to be maintained through the presidential candidate, and the only candidate to do that was Gary Johnson in 2016. So we're looking at a real issue in 2024. Well, for the 2026 cycle, if in 2024 the candidate for president doesn't pool, 2% in Georgia. So that because if you because the signature requirements, I believe, for any office is 5% of all registered voters in whatever geographical location. So for a state house race, you might be getting a couple thousand. It can be doable, but that's work, and you've got to be serious in order to do it. A U.S. House race, you're looking at what is it, 20,000 or so signatures.
Yep.
Public Service Commissioner, which is going to probably end up districted. That was the race. They have districts that the person has to live in, but they're elected statewide, and the court ruled that racist. So the court threw that position out, and that would be our position in 2026. That's our presidential year position to keep ballot access. That's going to probably end up districted, and so we're probably not. That's going to be around 80,000 people signatures to get on the ballot. So, to do it statewide, if it's at 5%, I mean, you're looking at a couple 100,000 signatures. Like it's absolutely absurd levels if you lose that. So
it's brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. Oof. All right. Going back to what you were saying, like towards the beginning, the response from the debate was really well. He got more money in. Clips about Shane were going viral on social media. I saw a lot of them. So what was the reception he got from that, and like, were there any big effects other than the money that came in right after that?
I mean, the money was definitely helpful. We were trying to run ads at that point and trying to do a whole bunch of other stuff. It was pretty cool to see, like, when people donate, they can also tag a little, like put a little comment in there. So it was interesting to see where all the donations came from and why they were donating. And tons of them came from out of state, from people who are just like, I'm not in your state, but I love what message you were preaching. Keep it up. Here's some money. Like, it was really encouraging to see all that. As far as,
I mean, there were,
Nick.
Yeah, there were even some ones that, like, there were things said that you're like, I don't know if that was the best thing, or did that go over people's head? Did we lose people? Like Shane mentioned CBDC, central bank digital currency there, right? And you wonder, does that go over people's head? But I mean, then you get some donations and some comments like, well, thank you for saying that, I'm donating specifically because you're the only person talking about this thing. So it's interesting what brings people in sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, someone needs to talk about it. No one else was.
Yeah.
All right. So now that at this point in time, when we're talking about now, the campaign is winding down. I'm sure the documentary is too. You're probably rushing to get it out. So what was it like trying to get it done towards the end?
So we had a premiere for the documentary on October 6th. I wanted it 1 month before the election to try to create a little push for Shane and get more people looking at it. I exported the film about 3 hours before the premiere, so that's how close it came.
Wow.
I mean, it was last minute. Like I was trying to get everything done. Like, I had to get a composer. My composer was still sending me music. Robbie was still sending me the last little bits of clips that I needed. It's just a lot of it's just a lot of work, dude. Like to put together a documentary like that, and to get it looking professional. Because the most important thing with like small movements and like things like the Libertarian Party or the Mises Caucus is to make, if you're going to make media, you need to make it be as professional as possible. And so I tried to make, even though it was just me walking around with a daggum camera 99% of the time, I tried to make it as professional looking, as like non-independent as possible. And to do that, you have to spend a stupid amount of time in the editing room, and figuring out all the graphics and all, like just everything that goes into it. And so it really came down to that last week. I was sleeping almost none, and yeah, really just throwing everything together that I possibly could. I mean, I'd been waiting on, I was praying for the Dave interview till like 2 weeks out. And then when I realized that wasn't going to happen, I was like, Jared, I need you to come in and interview with me, buddy. And I thought he killed it. I thought Jared's interview was fantastic.
For not being a guy with a whole lot of media experience or interview experience, yeah, Jared came through on that.
Yeah, we're gonna run him for some position here in Georgia.
Nice. So one other question about the documentary: where did the title come
from? It just kind of came to me. I started thinking about, like, after my first meeting with Shane, I told him that I didn't know what the title of the documentary was going to be yet. Then I was driving back home with my wife, and going through my head was like divide and conquer, because that's seemingly how the powerful do it, is they get everybody at each other's throats and then take over from there. And I didn't like the sound of divide and conquer because it sounded too violent, I think. Divide and dominate just seemed like just rolls off the tongue a little bit better for me. So that's where that came from. Yeah, it wasn't anything special. It was just, it's kind of how I just see the powerful people behind the scenes screwing us over and taking our power from us.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So what I like to do here, since normally we talk about PA issue topics and things that are going on, and we definitely do a lot of campaigns here in Pennsylvania. So one thing I want to ask both of you before we wrap up is just if you could say anything to any of our future candidates here in PA, like any advice or experience from what you've gone through for the past year or two working with Shane. Any takeaways at all? What would you say?
Nick?
Yes. So along those lines there, right? I kind of want to get into one of my favorite parts of the documentary here. And that's where Shane has a friend and he gets pulled over for driving while black. And Shane uses that as a springboard to go and get civil asset forfeiture taken off the books in one of the local towns near him.
Yeah, that's right.
And Yeah, and there's a whole conversation he had with the police chief there on his on his podcast. He plays that, and Jake uses that audio in the documentary. And then Jake's got the footage of him at the city council meeting there, getting his resolution passed there. And I think that's just a really interesting point and really got some ideas churning in my head, because he ended up running a statewide campaign, but he probably made the most change there by going in there and saying, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of this, and we're going to knock off all this excessive policing, and stop harassing people and things like that. So that and I was talking with some of the other organizers, Jared and in Georgia, about things like that, and how do we get some easy wins outside of campaigns, because campaigns aren't necessarily always a win, right? I mean, it's a possible lose, and maybe you get something out of it, but you're still, if you don't win, you're not making all the changes that you want. You're not, you don't get that vote. So trying to think, all right, when we get people in, how do we get people interested? And I think a lot of times people get interested and they kind of fall off. So I was talking with, like I said, some of the other organizers in Georgia, thinking, well, how do we get a program maybe where we can tackle issues like that at the local level there? Someone signs up and it's going to be, all right, here, take this little step, do this little thing. And we, work them down this path to the point of, all right, if you do this, then look at all the change you've made already just by joining and listening to us. Now they're hooked. Now they know how to make a change. Now their name's out there in the community. Then we, maybe get a little bit of press buzz on it. Another town falls on this, so that's kind of what I think. If people are looking to run for office, start maybe there and start pushing, the local city councils and things like that to make some of the changes before you're even elected. And if they don't, use all the media buzz that you can, whatever marketing tricks and whatever else, and use, if you get it, then great, here you are. Use that as a springboard for the campaign. And if you don't get it, well, then run on, well, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to fix this, and it's going to be better for everyone. So I think that's kind of where my mind is on that.
That's such a good point. At the premiere of the movie, I invited about half libertarians, half completely not libertarians. And a lot of the feedback I got from talking to those people after the film premiered was they loved that he actually made something happen at the local level and was actually practicing what he preached. And yeah, exactly what Nick said. That's such a good way to do it. And if you go on his website, radicalpod.com, you can find templates for exactly how to do those things, with gun control, cannabis, what else? Civil asset forfeiture.
He's got 5 or 10 of those written out, ready for you to take and, go stand at your city council meeting and wave it and say, we're going to fix things right now.
Yeah. And so that is such a good way to do that. And start making a name for yourself if you're planning on running, or even if you are running at a current time. So yeah, that's a great piece of advice from Nick, for sure. I would also say, man, libertarian campaigns are hard. Don't just try not to get burned out. Take your time, really think things through. Don't try to do too much, because unless you're a person who can handle doing too much constantly all the time for 9 or 10 months, it gets really hard. By the end of the campaign, we were all basically dead tired. Could barely function. So just take your time, think things through, and definitely reach out to people who have done it in the past. Reach out to me and Nick, and we can tell you that road you may not want to go down, or we didn't try this thing, maybe you want to try that, or just reach out to people who've done it before, because you're not going to know everything, especially if you're doing it for the first time, like me and Nick were. So
yeah, for sure. So yeah, there's some powerful lessons there. Definitely action at the local level. That's how we've accomplished a lot of what we have in PA as well. So I can't emphasize that enough. That even if you're running a statewide race, just it's a lot easier to make a clearly defined impact on the local level. So is there anything else either of you guys want to talk about that we didn't cover yet?
I don't think so.
I think I'm good.
Yeah,
all right,
I'm good.
then I'll just ask one more thing of you before we give our plugs. So what's next for both of you? What projects you got in the works, or what do you think you might be working on?
Nick, what you working on, man?
Currently I'm writing a strategic action plan for LP Georgia to give some direction in the long-term vision to the party. And that's so that our Mises Caucus candidates and our chair candidates and everyone else for this upcoming convention can wave that and say, look, here's our vision for the party. Here's what we plan to accomplish in the next year. Here's where we want to be in 5 years and 10 years, because I think that direction in that roadmap on where we're going and how to build and what goals we need to hit, it's kind of been non-existent. It's kind of just been a month by month, year by year. Well, we do this and we do that and we do this, and nobody has sat down to really say, here's what we need this year, and then next year let's reevaluate where we are and see how we get to the 5-year goal. And once we hit the 5-year goal, the 10-year goal, I mean, putting 10-year goals, I have some absurd goals in there, but it's like that's where you need to go. Like if
I like it.
It's a crazy plan. Like if you hit the 10-year plan, like LP Georgia would have a bigger paid staff than the national, right? But you've got to dream big, right?
Right.
Yes, you do.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Planning is important.
Reevaluate.
Something definitely that was lacking at the national level, and I think at the Pennsylvania level too. Before this year, before both had some changes in leadership, there wasn't quite the defined planning like there is now.
Yeah, I agree.
So I've been planning that out to try to help everyone out there, and then
nice.
It's been a task. I think the plan's at about 40 pages right now. Like it's a massive plan.
All right,
Nick. Massive evaluation of just everything. And there's a lot more to go. There's several sections that haven't even been written or anything put in, but I think that's going to be a big first step. There's other little projects going on in LP Georgia. So over the summer we had we did a crypto workshop. We put it on, offered it up to anyone in the community to come by, anyone in the party. Myself and our now chair, Zach Farnell, taught that. Jake was there for a little bit. And we've kind of continued it on that path. So there was I think we had a course that was the other week where one of our guys taught how to have like a smart home without the cloud, so that you can have all the nice functionality without running it through the Amazon or Google servers, so that you control your own stuff and it's not going to all the evil people. I believe Zach Varnell's doing a more advanced Bitcoin one, and then I am doing an intro to 3D printing in January. So, we're doing some educational stuff there, and I'd like to continue personally on a little bit more there, and do a little bit more education, Bitcoin, 3D printing, things like that. So I'm working some ideas there.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to you about that later. So I'm interested in those things. What about you, Jake?
I've been out of it for the last 5 weeks. I had surgery about 5 weeks ago, and it was rough. And then I got I got sick twice when I was in Peru, and now I currently have some version of the flu. So I've been
Oh man.
sweating a lot.
Well,
So like I do know that I'll still be I'll be shooting some commercials and media and stuff like that for LP Georgia quite a bit. I'm getting involved with LP Montana over the next couple of years because I'm moving up there. But for the next couple of years, I'll be doing media stuff here in LP Georgia, and that'll pretty much be it for me.
Right on.
Yeah.
So thanks, Jake, for talking to us about Divide and Dominate, and thank you, Nick, to join us and shed some more light on Shane's campaign. So you guys can stick around for a minute. I'll close out the show.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So next week, we're going to have Torin back on with Regina to talk a little bit more about psychedelics and the possible effects that it can have in regards to some of the topics that Torin was discussing last week related to the transgender issues. So that should be really interesting. I'm looking forward to that conversation and seeing if we can come to any conclusions from that. So I don't know quite where it'll end up. Well, we'll never know. Well, until next week anyway. So I'll wrap it up there. Thanks, everyone. Don't forget to tune in next week, 9 o'clock, for that episode, which will likely be the last one of 2022. So until then, don't forget to take human action.